at first yoga would be something that people try to do. So they do a side stretch. I'm like, so what about if you just like actually got into the movement a little bit and actually wiggled a little bit and actually started to go, oh, that feels good. Like, some days you have a stretch first thing and everything about you just goes like, oh, that's kind of what yoga should feel like for me. And a lot of people try to get yoga right. So I've got to get the pose right. You don't use your body to get into the pose, you use the pose to get into your body.
So this week, I am super excited to welcome to the show the wonderful Kirsty Gallagher, who some of you will already know because she and I share a few things. We're both actually really good friends with Kyle Gray. We also have written books about the moon. Kirsty has written Lunar Living. And the third thing we have in common is that we are both going to be at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival up in Birmingham. So I had this idea to look up some of the other speakers who are going to be at the festival because I thought it's a really good chance to sort of get to know some of the other people who are going to be there. And with my team, we picked out about 5 people we thought looked amazing, and you were one of them. So welcome to the show. Lovely to have you here.
And you, thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks, Kirsty. So, Kirsty, just for anyone who doesn't know you, tell us a little bit about you. I'm pretty sure you came from a yoga background, didn't you? But even tell us, like, where did you grow up? Did you grow up up north, or I have this idea you're from the north?
I am. The accent gives it away. Yeah,
yes.
I grew up north, and I'm one of 4, so we're kind of a really beautiful, close family. But I guess maybe a similar story to a lot of people on our journey, that I always grew up a little bit of the black sheep of the family. And I had a great auntie who did tarot cards and tea leaves, was really mystical, and I adored her. She was my favorite person growing up. And I had, we all lived in Lancashire. Another part of my family were in Yorkshire. So my auntie Mabel was in Yorkshire. So we'd see them not lots, but we go and visit. And I loved my visits to her, where she'd get the tea leaves out and the tarot. And I think it was her that first introduced me to astrology at a really young age. I remember getting a Parker's astrology book when I was kind of, I don't know, 12 perhaps, and like poring over this book to find out what my sun sign was and being just fascinated.
What is your sun sign?
I'm a Leo sun.
Excellent.
I'm a Leo sun, but as you'll know, I'm a Taurus moon. So my Taurus moon, so my Leo sun is only able to shine when my Taurus moon is like rested alone on the sofa and like had a lot of downtime. And then I guess I just started a real journey of searching of like, what's it all about? Like life didn't really make a lot of sense to me in the fact that I needed to make it make sense. So rules like the 9 to 5 just didn't make sense to me. I was like, why not 8 to 4 or 10 till 6? I don't get it. Like what difference does any of it make? So I went on this really big journey of, I became a crystal healer about 23 years ago, before anyone was doing crystals, before it was a fashionable thing to do. I did Reiki, I did regressional therapy, I looked into metaphysics, I worked with angels, spirit guides, really searching for what it was that where I could find answers. And it sounds really cliched, I know, but I did 1 or 2 yoga classes. And yoga, the philosophy of yoga, yoga isn't just something you do on a yoga mat. Yoga has this beautiful philosophy. It's a way of life. And I found that in yoga, there was an answer to every question. There was a beautiful richness to it of being able to tap into my inner world, of being able to connect to something greater, of being able to look into the sutras and find answers to things. And I just knew in that moment I wanted to be a yoga teacher. I had a really good job in marketing and PR at that time, in travel. Wow. Yeah. And I, as far as jobs went, I really enjoyed it. It was a good job. But I had this burning desire that I wanted to share yoga. And it took me, and I tell this story often because I think it helps people when people are called to a more spiritual path, but it took me about 2.5 years to get there. And I'd every day of my corporate job, I can still remember what the toilet cubicle looked like. I'd go and sit on the cubicle in the toilet and I'd cry and I'd cry and I'd beg the universe of like, why is it not happening yet? I want to go to India. I knew I wanted to go to India, because I knew I wanted to go to where yoga really came from. I wanted to go to the roots. The journey took me a few years, and I realize now, looking back, that had I gone any sooner, I wouldn't be sat here with you now. I wasn't ready. There were things I needed to learn, ways in which I needed to grow. As always, the universe knew best. Human me didn't understand it whatsoever. But then, I went and lived in India for just over a year. most of my time in Mysore. I did a little bit of time in Goa, a little bit of time in Kerala. I practiced yoga there. I did my teacher training out there. I stayed and taught in the school that I did my training at out there. And that's when I found the moon as well, actually in a really deep way, because it's traditional not to practice on new and full moon days. So everyone would have rest days on moon days, and
Right.
everyone would hang out together in like the cafes and the coffee shops. And I would find that everyone's energy would differ on a new and full moon day, and everyone would be having similar relationship problems or similar anxieties or similar sleep disturbances. And it just got me hooked of like, what is this energy we can begin to tap into? And really, so it's traditional in yoga because you've done so many hours of yoga a day, you're sore, your body's beaten. So you do this oil massage where you rub oil into yourself and then you rest and let the oil soak in. And so in these moments, I just chat to the moon and say, okay, what have you got? Like, what have you got? What's going on here? What's this energy coming through? What is it I need to do with this energy? And that was kind of 2009. And I've been living that way ever since. I came back, started to teach yoga, meditation, lunar work, and then it's kind of evolved and grown from there. It's been a beautiful journey.
Just going back to your family, just something I was curious about, like the stereotype of, people from the north of England are really straightforward, down to earth, hardworking, no nonsense folk. And maybe that's a terrible cultural stereotype and I shouldn't do it. I don't know. But as I grew up Australian, so, that's kind of the thing you got from the movies and the books and even the Beatles sort of mythology and all that. So you being interested in this stuff, was that really, like you say, very, very black sheep for your family?
I think so. I mean, especially, I do remember when I told my family I was quitting my job to go to India, like my granddad in particular, because you didn't give up a good job in marketing and PR. I mean, my grandparents' generation worked so hard to get jobs like that. And he was just like, she's bloody mental. There's something wrong with her. Like, what's going on? I think, I don't think he understood it. And my family, it was all done with a lot of love, and I mean, bear in mind, I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And so back then it wasn't normal that it was talked about, and especially not up north. So I think even in London, down south, it's always been a little bit ahead of the curves and the trends. And yoga, probably when I first started teaching yoga up north, I was literally one of the only yoga teachers up north in my area. When I first started running retreats in 2012, you'd go onto the retreat websites and there'd be me. You'd go on a retreat website now and you'll probably find 10,000 retreats.
Yeah.
So it was very different. And my family would do it in a loving way. So in a way that only family can, where if anything was going a bit wrong, they'd be like, oh, the angels aren't helping you right now, are they? Or go and hold a crystal and see what happens there. So it was always done with a lot of love, but I think it just wasn't, as you say, you worked hard and you took care of your family. And I guess this world has exploded over the past couple of years, but go back, 14, 15 years and people weren't wandering around the office with no shoes on and wondering why we had to do a 9 to 5 and communicating with spirit guides and things like that. It just wasn't done. And I think that's why I'm so passionate in what I do now, because I had to really live it at a time when it wasn't necessarily accepted, And even now people say they've been to a yoga class. You go back 10 years, people thought yoga was something that like old women did in leotards in a village hall, and no one would admit they'd gone to yoga. They'd like say they'd gone to something else. And I think now people feel safe to go to yoga, so they might go to more of a moon circle or to something to do with like the goddess or witch work, and they go, oh yeah, I went to a yoga class, because again, that's acceptable. So now there are a number of teachers who used to come to my classes, and from coming to my classes then decided it was also their path, and they went and did their training. And when I then moved to London, over 10 years ago, they kind of took over the classes I was giving up. And so even now if I go back up, I'll speak to people who are like part of my lineage, so to speak, where they are people that at one time came to my classes. So it's always hard to be a bit of a black sheep, but the call within me was so loud I couldn't ignore it.
Yeah. But it sounds like they didn't really give you a hard time anyway. They just thought it was a bit funny or whatever.
Exactly. It was just done in the way that families can when they like rib each other and,
Exactly. And so they teased you, the angels aren't helping you. Do you work with the angels as well?
Yeah. So what's been really interesting for me is, I guess that in the beginning of the exploration of the journey, I did so many things, and it's like that. It's an age-old thing, I guess, on a spiritual path, that it's almost like breadcrumbs. And so sometimes things won't necessarily make exact sense at the time that you're doing it, but further down the line, it all begins to make sense. So even the crystals, as I mentioned, I became a crystal healer it's about 22, 23 years ago, before most people were doing it. And I've always, I mean, my house is full. I've always got like a crystal on hand, always, they're everywhere. And to me, it was just as natural as having like fingers and toes, having crystals around. And it wasn't until kind of my publishers mentioned about one of my books becoming about a crystal book that I was like, wow, so that training I did 20 years ago that I loved and I utilized, but it never became something I publicly necessarily perhaps talked about or did. This is making sense now why I did it. And I guess things that for people like you and I who've been on the journey for a long time, so talking to our spirit guides or angels or higher self or universal source or all these different things that we almost, I won't say taken for granted, but we've done it for so long. And it's funny for me that people are suddenly into crystals, and I'm like, haven't we always been into crystals? Haven't we been doing this for ages? But yes, angels aren't necessarily a huge part of my path, but I did a lot of work with them again a number of years ago. And so even now, sometimes the energy will dip in, or something will come along that takes me back into that work I did. And so it's all little threads that kind of have weaved together over the past 20 years that now I'll pull on the certain threads, and it all has evolved into the work that I do.
Amazing. So tell us what you're going to be talking about at the Mind Body Spirit Festival.
Oh, so one of my really big passions when it came to crystals, and when I wrote the book Crystals for Self-Care, I was very passionate about not just creating another crystal book that was like, here's a rose quartz, here's a clear quartz, here's an amethyst. So many people find that they get a crystal because at some point, if you're on a spiritual path, yes, you're going to buy a crystal. But then most people get them and they go like, what do I do with it? And then they're like, just put it on a shelf, and then won't do anything else with it. Because I just feel that the more we can give this information, if you've got the crystal now, here's what to do with it. Here's what to do with it. You've got it. This is how to work with it. And so I wanted to very much write a book. And we did get a bit of kickback on it about people saying it doesn't tell me about the specific crystals, but I wanted it to be a book that you have the crystals, here's how you use them. So it took you through all different chapters of, cleansing and creating grids and how to meditate with crystals and all these different things. So I'm going to be doing similar at Mind Body Spirit, of talking about kind of the energy of crystals, what crystal energy is, how we can work with them, why we should work with them, and then actually how we can go away and do that, so that if you wanted to go out to a stand then and go and buy something, you'd be able to take that home and go, okay, I know what to do with this. We'll probably weave some meditation in there as well, and some grounding and, all of that kind of magic. And so, yeah, really informative.
Yeah, so it sounds amazing. So, I mean, with the crystals, for example, how does that tie into your overall well-being mission? Is it, you're trying to bring it all together, I suppose, are you? All that you've learned over the years?
I honestly believe that for me, I can only ever really teach what I know. And so I have lived experience of working with the moon, of practicing yoga and how it changed my life, of working with crystals to manifest and to tap into different parts of myself. I've worked with spirit guides, been able to really draw that energy in. And so it's now just been able to share that so other people on the beginning of their journey, I've got a real lived experience to be able to talk about that. And so with the crystals, I feel like just more and more people are getting interested. More and more people are wanting to begin to utilize the energy of crystals. We live in a world where, particularly over the last couple of years, it makes very little sense anymore. People are looking for something deeper to believe in, ways to connect on a deeper level with themselves. And I do believe crystals are a really beautiful gateway into being able to harness, if living by the moon is a step too far for you because you're like, well, what do you mean I'm going to live by the moon? That sounds a bit, no, that's a bit woo, like the moon doesn't affect us, Crystals are kind of a bit of a safe option to begin with, where most people nowadays have a crystal. Yeah. Most people nowadays in their house or have been gifted one, or even at least know someone that's got a crystal. So it's not quite so far-fetched anymore. And I love skeptics, whether it's skeptics in the moon work or astrology. I adore working with skeptics. And when people are like, well, crystals don't work, I'm like, how do you think your mobile phone works? Like there's literally a quartz crystal in your mobile phone and your watch and your computer. That is literally the vibrational energy of a crystal that is making all of this tech work for your TV remote control. All of that is a crystal. So tell me again that crystals don't have an energy and a power to be able to make things happen. And that's kind of starts to go in there. But then I think it's super important for people to find what works for them, because even for me on my journey, there's been Reiki and regressional therapy and crystal healing and angels and spirit guides and yoga, meditation and moon work and astrology. And we can't necessarily do it all. And so it's important for people to really pick what works for them. And so for some people, it might be just simple mindfulness. For some people, it might be that holding a crystal helps them get through their day at work. And so I think it's just important for each person to explore. And if crystals don't work for you, that's okay. You'll find something that does, but don't stop looking. Just keep going. And sometimes we're not ready for things. Like so many people in the beginning, like, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. I don't feel anything. And after then they've maybe explored a few different avenues, they come back and they're ready to then begin to open up to the world of crystals and their vibrational energy. So yeah, I guess I just want to offer a little sneak peek into what's possible so people can then go on that little journey and explore it a bit more for themselves.
Yeah, beautiful. And with your moon work, do you combine crystals and the moon ever? And yoga?
Yeah. So I do a like kind of lunar yoga meditation classes where we will then begin to use the lunar energies to then work kind of somatically, viscerally, on a cellular level into the body. Because again, for most people, we're very disconnected from our deep body wisdom. We live from kind of the neck up and we live from in here, and we don't realize that we've got this whole intuitive, deep inner wisdom that's always trying to talk to us. Our body hears everything. When we run around all day going, yeah, I'm fine, absolutely fine. Our body's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And when we try to ignore emotion, suppress emotion, we also ignore and suppress our intuition. And so when we can start to come back into the wisdom of our bodies and really connect, and that's what I loved about yoga, is connecting to that deep body wisdom, where a little energy that felt stuck and trapped in here wasn't necessarily a stuck energy in my shoulder. It was something that I was holding on to. It was a resentment that had formed over a conversation I hadn't had, or something I hadn't gone after, or whatever it might be. So the more I started to tap into that deep body wisdom, the more you can really check in with where energy's blocked and emotions are stuck and things are stagnant within us, and we're swallowing down what we want to say, and we're holding resentment and hurts and pain. And so we can start to just move that through the body. We can start to free it all up to really listen to that wisdom on a deeper level. And again, things like crystals, sometimes for people just throwing out, set an intention on the moon is a bit like, well, I don't know what you mean. So if we can set intentions on crystals, I ask people often to set a moon intention on a crystal, and then every day, just hold that crystal for a few minutes a day and just re-feel the energy of that intention again. Reconnect back to the energy of that. It gives people something tangible to be able to work with, rather than it just being up here, because our minds are so busy. Asking people to grasp things like that if they're new to the journey is a lot harder, or even to sit and think about their intention, because their mind is like, let's go over here instead, let's go here instead. So when you can give people things like crystals that are actual tangible tools, I think it really helps to bring things into more of a physical reality for people.
With yoga, what I hear people talking about, all these amazing things that happen to them when they're doing yoga. I feel like I get the moon, obviously, I get crystals, I get angels, I actually get Reiki, I've had amazing past life experiences, all those. Yoga is the one thing I still feel like I'm just standing there stretching. Where am I going wrong?
I mean, in some ways, maybe you're not. Maybe yoga just isn't your pathway this lifetime. Maybe that's not for you to explore this lifetime. And again, as we mentioned earlier, I think people, especially at the start of a journey, feel like they have to be doing everything. Well, I've got to be doing the yoga class and the moon stuff and the intention setting and the crystals, and I've got to be journaling every day, and I've got to be meditating every day. And it's like, whoa, like, okay.
Yeah.
We can appreciate certain things, but maybe that's not our path. Maybe that's not our way.
Maybe it's just not my path, because I've been taught sun salutations by yoga experts in India. I actually met Patabi Joyce. I'll just tell the story. I may edit this out.
Of course.
So I went there. I was in India to do some hotel reviews, as back when I was a journalist. And then I was going up to Mysore, and a girlfriend of mine had studied with Patabi Joyce, and it was when I was a straight journalist. And I thought, oh, okay, that's where Patabi Joyce is. And I knew, that he was very well known and all this. For one thing, I don't think I treated him with the reverence he was used to.
Interesting.
And I was actually, I don't think I actually have a teacher in India, but I don't think I'd met my teacher yet. So I didn't really understand why all these people were falling at his feet and literally kissing his feet and all this. And I was going to interview him for an Australian magazine, an insert called Body and Soul, which is in the Sunday Telegraph every weekend. And I got there, and he was so rude and so arrogant. I mean, perhaps I was really ignorant. I don't feel like I was. He just rubbed me up the wrong way. So maybe yoga really isn't my path. That I thought, either I'm going to write this and say, this guy is so arrogant, don't get it, or and really upset a lot of people. And I'm not talking about making them angry. Wasn't about that. I didn't want to hurt people who revered him. Or I'm not going to write it. So I just said to the magazine, couldn't do the interview, not going to write it. But maybe you're right. Maybe yoga isn't my path. And maybe that's why he was like, he and I didn't click at all. Because I've done yoga on and off for I don't know how many years, at least 20. But I don't know. I mean, I get more. Not even I get more from meditation. I don't get it. I do it, and it's very nice, but I don't get this thing that you and Kyle and people talk about. And I don't know if I haven't stuck with it consistently enough, or it's because I do it by myself instead of a class where you've got the group energy. I don't know, but I haven't achieved that yoga nirvana.
Possibly. I always say to people as well, it's very much a student-teacher relationships. It's very much about finding a teacher that really speaks your language. And so I used to say to people all the time, like, people might come to my classes and just not get it and be like, don't get it. And I'd always say, please, if you go to a class and the first one you don't like, go and try a second one, and then at least try a third. And if after 3 you're like, no, then yoga's not for you, and that's okay.
Well, but I have done so much yoga by myself, just using a book, or just, from knowing the moves from when I've had a teacher. I did have one great teacher in Australia, actually, who used to come around to my house. So maybe I need a bit more of the, even, one-on-one online or whatever. Okay.
Absolutely. Just to try that, because it's important. I used to teach a lot of corporate yoga, and I adored it because at first yoga would be something that people try to do. So they do a side stretch, and I'd be like,
yes, I think that's what I'm doing. And I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I'm like, but does that feel good? I'm like, so what about if you just like actually got into the movement a little bit, and actually like wiggled a little bit here, a little bit, and actually started to go, oh, that feels good. Like, some days you have a stretch first thing and everything about you just goes like, oh, that's kind of what yoga should feel like for me. So it's not about the rigidity of, and a lot of people try to get yoga right. So I've got to get the pose right. You don't use kind of the pose. You don't use your body to get into the pose. You use the pose to get into your body. I'll tell you a beautiful story. So my teacher in India, before I went and I did a lot of Ashtanga as well. And then my teacher in India, I went and practiced with him. And all the people around the room were doing these beautiful flows, and even some of them doing advanced things. And I'd been in Ashtanga for about 3 or 4 months. And I wasn't amazing, but I had a fairly like good, steady practice. And I went to practice with him, and he'd literally made me stand with my feet just wider than hip width apart, my arms out to the sides. I was raging. I'd look around the room and I'd be like, they're moving. Why is he making me stand here? I hated him. And I don't use that word lightly. I passionately disliked him, passionately. And he'd make me stand there like that for hours at a time. And my mind would be doing loops around the room, watching everyone. I'd be having conversations with him in my head, or I was going to get him told, and I was going to leave the school, and I wasn't going to do the yoga teacher training. And then I never forget the moment. One day I was like, okay, he's going to make me stand here. How about I be here? So I dropped in, and I was like, oh, there's my feet on the earth. Oh, there's the energy in my little toe. There's my breath moving through my body. Oh, there's the energy in the tips of my fingers. And on that day, he let me move, because he understood that I was doing yoga. I wasn't there. I wasn't present. I wasn't mindful. I wanted to go through the gymnastics of what poses look like and look at me doing these advanced things. There was no presence there at all. And as soon as I found that presence and I could put my energy into my little toe and I could put the energy into my actual, and I felt my body, he let me move. And he saw that. And that to me is what yoga is. It's not doing the perfect moves. It's about knowing your body well enough to start to listen to all of that tangled up junk in our bodies that we've stored and suppressed and denied. We can start to go like, and that's intuition, right? When people say to me, I used to say to people all the time, the same little voice on your mat that first of all tells you when you can't get into a pose, oh, you're so rubbish, you're useless, look at them doing it really well, you're horrific, like they're doing it well, you're so rubbish. It's the same voice off the mat that's going to say, you can't go for that promotion, you're not going to be any good at this, you might as well give up. But then equally, that same voice on your mat that goes, oh, just move that way a bit. Oh, yeah, that feels good. Okay, now stretch this a bit. Okay, now move this a little bit. It's the same voice, it's that intuitive voice within you that goes, just go say yes to that. Just make that phone call. Just go down that little pathway. Just do this. So the more we can tap into that intuitive knowing on our mats of like, not the rigidity of, okay, I'm doing a side stretch now. God, this is boring. How long have we got to do this for? Be there. Oh, how does this feel as I stretch? Oh, yeah, if I just move a little bit there, that's where your body will then start to talk to you and start to help you to unravel all of that stuff. And that to me is where yoga gets magical. There's a lot of beautiful research lately about the fascia, the connective tissue in the body, storing things like this. We get stuck energy in the body. And so you've just described exactly what yoga is. It's to help us. It's almost like cleaning your mirror. It's almost like when it's been raining and you put your car windscreen on and it clears the windscreen. So it's just helping to clear the accumulation of stuck and stored memory. So I say to people all the time, you might find in a yoga class a little memory bubbles up. And what we need to be careful to is we don't need to attach a story to it, but that's just perhaps a little bubble of emotion or a memory that perhaps didn't quite get processed at the time that now is just ready to bubble up and away. It's gone. You might find an emotion comes up. You don't need to sit there and go, oh my God, why am I feeling sad? I shouldn't be feeling sad. I've got nothing to feel sad about. It might be a sadness from 10 years ago that got stuck and stored. We store a lot of emotions in our hips. Anything that we don't like deal with, anything we suppress and deny gets pushed down into the body. The body's a great storage unit. And it might be suddenly that emotion is like, I'm ready to go now. So it gets to bubble up and out and it gets to move. And we just need to hold space for that. So many people used to cry in yoga and they'd be apologizing and saying, oh my gosh, I don't know. Or laughter might come through or a little bit of joy would come through. Oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I'm doing this. It's just because when we get to, there's a saying in yoga about your issues are in your tissues. Oh. And so when we like almost wring out, it's like, imagine it's a sponge. When you're holding a yoga pose and you're kind of wringing out those tissues, you're starting to wring out the issues.
You're making me want to go downstairs and do some yoga.
My work here is done. But yeah, exactly that. Exactly. So when you can start to find it on that level, that's when it takes on magic. But again, just to say, some other people out there might feel the same as you and go, don't get it. Find something that gives you the same passion that I get when I talk about yoga.
Well, I definitely used to love it with her. And then we came to London or she had a baby or something happened. I don't remember. I'm just wondering, do you think, I mean, you do yoga by yourself, I suppose, in the morning, do you? It's like, I'm just thinking, oh, can I only do that then if I have a teacher, or can I still just get to that stage, but, try and remember we used to put on music. I couldn't just go off and make a cup of tea halfway through because she was there and I was paying her. So maybe I was a bit more committed to the session. You don't have to have someone in the room with you, I suppose, is the question.
No. And what you almost want to get to eventually in the end stages of yoga is the fact that you don't have a sequence that you have to remember. You start to move intuitively. So you just tune into your body today and say to your body, what do I need? And then you start to be able to, I'm a big advocate of coming out of the rigidity even of certain yoga poses. So even a simple cat-cow, it doesn't need to be an up and down cat-cow. It might be an undulating cat-cow. It might be a figure of 8 cat-cow. It might be a circular cat-cow. It might be forwards and backwards cat-cow. Because we want to tap into that wisdom and freedom of our bodies, and then our souls, our intuition, our divine feminine energy that wants to weave and move and flow and doesn't want to, the masculine energy is rigidity. And so as much as I loved Ashtanga because it gave me a set sequence and I didn't have to think about it too much, it was a very masculine practice because of the rigidity and the containment, and it had to be the same. Was when we start to tap more into goddess energy, feminine energy, that's weave, that's flow, that's intuition of just following what feels good in the moment. So it does help people in the beginning to have a sequence, because again, as humans, we want to get it right. Even with crystals, people like, well, I've got to get it right. Like, or with the moon, you'll know that. People are always like, oh my God, if I don't get it exactly right, then something terrible is going to happen. And I need to know exactly like what I'm doing. And over time, we just learn to be able to find our own ways in it all. So the same with yoga, it can help in the beginning to have a sequence where you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. And there might be days when you get on your mat, and I found this when I was teaching, I'd get on my mat and be like, oh, I don't want to tell myself what to do. I've spent all day telling other people what to do. I just want someone else to tell me what to do. And so it might be that you find someone that you really resonate with online. There's so many beautiful classes online now, and there's so many 10, 15 minutes. There's no excuse not to put a little YouTube video of 10 minutes in the morning. I'll tell you where most people find the real benefit of yoga is when you stop doing it. So you'll do it and do it and do it, and then you won't notice, and then you'll miss 1 or 2 days, and you'll suddenly be like, oof. It's almost like if you didn't brush your teeth for a few days, you'd be like, oh, something just doesn't feel right. That's when you normally find it with yoga, that when you don't do a couple of days, you're just a bit off. You take offense more quickly, you get fired up a bit more easily, you're offended a bit more easily, you aren't quite as calm as you would be normally. Things start to get under your skin a little bit more, because again, you're not clearing away that accumulation of junk. And sometimes that might be laying down on the floor breathing and sobbing, and some days it might be rigorously moving, and some days it might be just really gentle little stretches.
So I went to another yoga school in India at one point, actually. I think I was reviewing them for the hotel's website that I was doing. And I remember what they taught there was that yoga's and also I experienced this with dynamic meditation, with the Osho dynamic meditation. So that yoga would be to get the body moving, and then you would meditate. So is that what you do?
I mean, that's the only reason when people talk about yoga, and kind of not to get too deep into it, but there's what's called the 8 limbs of yoga. And so asana, the actual moving, is one part. The only reason that yoga asana was originally created was to open the hips enough and to strengthen the spine enough to be able to sit in meditation. And so even like when I first went to India all those years ago, the Indians would think we were slightly crazy of why we wanted to do all of these amazing, big, advanced things.
They don't do yoga that much.
They'll do it, but it'll be more, as I say, it'll just be very, very simple to be able to then sit in meditation. It won't be to do handstands or flips or anything fancy. And so originally that's the only thing that, and the word asana translates to comfortable seat. It was so you could sit in a comfortable seat to then be able to move into the, let's say, higher stages of, you know, being able to sit in meditation, being able to withdraw your senses from the outside world, being able to connect to the divine consciousness, being able to eventually reach samadhi, enlightenment. And so as even deep yogis progress, they will probably start to do less and less asana as their body is just open, and more of the deep meditative practices.
Yeah, amazing. Because I actually, what I thought it was, and maybe it's because I'd done the dynamic meditation quite a lot back in the day in Sydney, I thought it was almost like to wear yourself out, to do all the distractions, to get all that stuff out of your system, and then you can sit and meditate.
I think from modern day world it maybe is. I don't think that was necessarily the origins of yoga, because they didn't have the distractions that we have. They didn't have big tech vying for our attention with everything, or advertising telling us that this is what we needed to be happy, and look over this way, no, look this way, no, you need this, no, you need this. So they just simply weren't as distracted as we were. So that's where I do think perhaps some of the more dynamic styles of yoga meditation have fitted our current world, because when you're doing kind of Ashtanga, for example, you can't necessarily be thinking what you're having for dinner, because you're in it, and it's hard and it's tough and it's, you know. So I do think on some levels they do work for that. I would argue, just again, the path I'm on now, that again, it is just a lot more of a masculine based practice, and then we do end up still pushing, struggling, aiming, striving, versus softening, being, receiving.
Can I just ask you, it's kind of an inane question, but I am curious. Do you have a morning routine that you would like to share with us? Because I'm sure you do something sensible, even if it's different every day.
I do. I really do. And I'm happy to share some of the things I do. But I don't know why I'm always so cautious to share my morning routines. And I do think in a way it's because part of the work that I do and I'm really passionate about is empowering other people to find their own truth, their own rituals, their own routines. So again, it's like, don't look at me to give you all the answers. I can give you the guidance, and I can give you again my 20 odd years of this is what I worked on and this is what I found for me. But then I feel like people, if they're not doing exactly what I'm doing, it makes them feel less than, or like they're somehow doing something wrong. Or, and again, I might
100%.
say I do yoga every day, and then someone like you is going to go, but I hate doing yoga. Now I'm not enlightened because I don't enjoy doing the yoga thing that Kirsty does every single morning.
Right.
So I prefer to give a little bit of a structure. So one thing I will always normally do in the morning, and I started this when I lived in India, was lighting a candle. So when I lived in India and I was doing my yoga teacher training and we were starting at 4 a.m., I didn't have time for any big rituals, but ritual is such a huge part of my life that we have so many routines, but we have very few rituals. And for me, having rituals is what gives life meaning. And it's what helps keep me connected to all of my practices. So lighting a candle in the morning in India that took all of 5 seconds was me in that moment, bringing myself into the day, being present, lighting that candle, inviting the universe and myself into the day and being like, I'm here, I'm present. So anyone that tells me they've not got time for a morning ritual, I'm sorry, but if you can't find 10 seconds to light a candle, there's really something wrong in your life. Even if you've got kids, like you can do this. So there'll always be some element of a lighting a candle of a moment, because otherwise we get up, we're running around, we're grabbing toast and coffee, we're running out of the door. There's part of you still in bed. There's part of it that's gone in the day ahead. There's part of you still in yesterday. We're scattered. So for me, that morning of lighting a candle is bringing all of me into the moment. I invite myself here.
I love that. Can I just say, my teacher in India says exactly the same thing. Just says, even if you can't meditate, if you can't chant, if you can't do a puja, light a candle, just have a moment.
Yeah. And that's all it takes, because it's just presence.
Maybe a bit of incense if you like incense.
Yeah.
Or oil, essential oil.
Absolutely. And it's also that, for me, telling yourself that you are important, that you matter, that you finding those few moments for yourself in a day matter. Because especially as women, we tend to put ourselves so down the list of what matters. And the more you do that, the more you tell yourself that you don't matter, that your opinions don't matter, that your a moment to yourself doesn't matter. And that over time has real consequences. So if you can say, no, do you know what, for these next 10 seconds, I matter. I matter. And I'm going to bring all of myself here because I matter in this moment enough to just I joke to parents all the time, lock yourself in the bathroom, tell everyone you're having a wee, like find that 10 seconds for yourself. There'll always then for me be some form of self-inquiry. So that might just be sitting hands over heart, checking in, how you doing, Kirst? What's going on for you today? It might be journaling. It might be more of, there's always normally movement is involved as well. That might sometimes be yoga. It might sometimes.
And when you do your yoga, are you still in your PJs?
Most times. Just roll straight out of bed, because otherwise, once the outside world's got me, it's got me. It's got me. If I don't do things first thing in the morning, I very rarely do them, because the world's got me.
Where do you light your candle? In your bedroom, or?
Yeah, I've got a little altar.
Wow.
I always have an altar. Always have an altar.
The details here.
Yeah. Wherever I go, I have an altar. So I have an altar space. I will go to my altar, because then me going to my altar says to me, the same ways that people say have a bedtime routine, when you then tell yourself, this is it. When I go to my altar, this is my spiritual practice. This is my time. So yeah, there'll always be a bit of movement. There'll always be quiet time, which again, some people hear the word meditation and it makes them cringe, and they visualize sitting in lotus with eyes squeezed closed and doing mudras and having to do things. Take away the word meditation if that doesn't feel right to you, and just set a timer on your phone for 30 seconds, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then just breathe. Just be. Just be there. If you don't want to call it meditation because that sounds too, don't call it meditation, but there'll always be some form of inquiry, quiet time, checking in. And it kind of evolves and grows over time, depending on if I'm in a space where I'm on a big deadline, like I am now, my time is shorter, or if I'm in a time when I've got a bit more time and I can add to it. There's always a structure. But again, we don't want to be rigid with that, because then we start to tell ourselves we're not good enough, we failed, we've somehow not kept up the ritual, I'm rubbish at this doesn't work. So the structure's always got to be a little bit, it's got to be able to move with me, but equally it has to be something that we do every day, because that's where the dedication and the commitment comes in to, this is important to me.
Yeah, and I love it, and I try and get a bit of breath work in sometimes.
Beautiful. So what's yours? What would you do?
I don't do it in my bedroom, and I wonder if I should, because I do think there's always that possibility of coming downstairs and in that moment looking at my phone or whatever, and suddenly it's 10 o'clock, you know.
Yeah.
But assuming I make it down stairs, I just do a very simple stretch, because obviously I've got my yoga hang-ups that I'm working on apparently. I'm having breakthroughs. I do a tiny little bit of stretching, and then I generally will sit down and on the floor, on the couch, cross-legged, and because I just feel really comfortable like that, with headphones, and listen to something. I'm on a weight loss journey, and I actually got hypnotized by someone in the States a year ago who played this amazing track by Craig Pruis, which is, I think it's 108 Names for the Divine Mother.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And he happened to play that, and it happened to have my teacher's name in there. You know, it was all just very coincidental. And afterwards, so I said, what was that track? And he told me. So I often I'll play that, because that anchors me in my good habits, I suppose. I also love it. Or I'll listen to my friends Ida and Joe, who are kirtan singers or whatever, Insight Timer. And that's really important to me. And then often I will then do an oracle card and journal about it. And then I may or may not have done some breath work in there. I mean, it's beautiful. It changes a lot. But yeah, another very accomplished spiritual teacher that I know from the ashram in India, Kulreet Chowdhury, who has written quite a few different books. She does it in her pajamas in her bedroom. She does, and chanting as well, which I also do a bit of chanting. It's amazing. All right, so I'll let you go, because we've had our time. But one more question: will you give us a hint what your next book is about, or is it a big secret? You've done Lunar Living, you've done Crystals for Self-Help, Sacred Seasons, which we haven't talked about.
It's a big. We're going to announce on Halloween, so I'm not sure when this is going to come out. But we're going to announce then. So probably by the time this comes out, people might know. I have dropped a few hints of it in this podcast. So if anyone does get to listen to it and wants to kind of have a little guess of what it's about, I can't help myself at the moment. There are little hints coming out here, there, and everywhere. But a couple of weeks and the secret will be out.
And just finally, where do people find you online?
Kirsty Gallagher, pretty much everywhere. So Kirsty Gallagher on Instagram. I try and share a lot about kind of the current energies we're in, just in the hope it helps us to know that we're all in this together, this mad world together. Kirsty Gallagher website, Kirsty Gallagher Facebook, Kirsty Gallagher, pretty much everywhere you'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, Kirsty, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It was amazing. I am literally going to go downstairs and at least just sit in my favorite pose, or three of my favorite poses, and just sit with it, and maybe try and rediscover a little bit of what I've obviously somehow lost somewhere. Because having remembered those experiences in Australia, it reminds me, okay, maybe I just have been rushing, or you know, got an idea in my head or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Love.
I'll see you soon.